to Other Duties as Assigned. We're starting season 5 here with episode 1. And the focus now is on being the architect of culture in your building. You know, culture is such an important thing. It's one of those intangibles that you can make tangible through the things that you do, and you can be really intentional about. And so the concept of this episode is being the culture architect in your building and really setting the tone after break. I'm recording this episode coming off of winter break, starting a new semester, and I want to be able to talk about with you kind of what that looks like. My first point here is that culture doesn't restart automatically. Just because your building or your people were in a good place, your team was in a good place as you went off to a break or you stepped away for a little bit, don't expect that it's going to come back just as a continuation of where you were. It's truly a re-entry, kind of a new beginning. And that can be good and bad. If you had things heading in the right direction, I felt really good about where we were as a building as we went away. But that doesn't mean I'm going to come in and come back and assume we're going to be right back there. And so really being intentional about cultivating that. And then, just wanting to help get folks that, realize that as kids go away from the routine of school and teachers go away and administrators go away from that routine of school, it takes a minute to get back into routine. I always think, some of our students with the most needs, getting off of that routine can really throw them out of whack. But even personally, my sleep habits aren't as good during break. My eating habits maybe aren't as good over break. I'm not getting up and working out and doing all the things that maybe I do to kind of get myself started on a school day. I give myself a chance to recharge. Well, now I'm going to have to get back into that. I can't stay up as late. I got to go to bed earlier. I got to get up earlier. I got to get that routine back in the swing of things. And as an adult, we've had practice of that. Teenagers, they can be some of the worst, especially when they have, a break where they don't have to follow those sleep patterns. Man, that's such an important piece for them. You have to rebuild it. And because you're the architect of this culture in your building, you have to understand that takes designing systems, structures, and making intentional choices. Think about an architect. They don't just go look at a building or go admire a building and go, man, this is a really nice building. They're the ones who are putting the things in place that create that great building. And I would expect that you are trying to do the same thing in your building. In August, when you start a school year, or July, when you start a school year, there's all this kind of excitement for a new year. There's some positivity. There's some real anticipation for the new year. And you can hit the ground running a little bit easier, a little more buy-in, I think, sometimes at the start of a year. Everybody everybody is coming into it with that same kind of positive mindset, mostly. Definitely optimism, adrenaline, all those things kind of churning the machine of school right at the beginning. Where in January, people have just finished a semester of school. There is a little bit of that monotony and that, the weather outside, all those things. We're filming this in Indiana. In a January in Indiana can be pretty bleak. And we had a nice warm day today. There's no promise that tomorrow we don't have 6 inches of snow. And so we definitely want to think about that and kind of meet people where they are. Having good habits, building that trust with your staff and your students, and just being consistent. Being the same person, showing up every day, ready to help your team is really an important piece of that. You need to reflect about where you are, reflect about your school, look at the places, as you finish up a break and finish up a semester, and you think about where are some of the places you can make some gains. There are some risks if if you're inconsistent with expectations, if your staff gets frustrated, if you allow student behavior to kind of drift and go different ways. And January is really the perfect storm of all those things coming together. And so you really need to be super intentional about culture and what you're doing in January and in the middle of the year, in the middle of the race. If you're a great long distance runner, you got to start strong, you got to finish strong, but man, you got to have a strong middle too. And so that's where we are. We're in the middle of the race right now. And this is where culture is going to show up without all the hype of the start of school and all that excitement. What are some things you can do to help set the temperature in your building? It's interesting, it's about what you tolerate, what you reinforce, and what you model. And I think all three of those things are important. What you allow people to do will set the tone for what's acceptable. No matter what you say, it's what you let happen. And so you have to hold students and teachers accountable, and you've got to be there to help. Excuse me, be there to help them. You've got to reinforce positive things when you see things the way it's supposed to be going, and then you personally have to model the way you want things to look. As an administrator, you've got to be visible. You can't be sitting in your desk. You've got to be in the hallways. You got to be out there at arrival, at dismissal, in the lunchroom. You got to be in classrooms. My inbox has been going 1,000 miles an hour. My to-do list has been growing out all the time now. But right now is probably the most important time. If you think about what we just were talking about, this perfect storm, man, I got to be out there. I got to be visible. I got to be there for our team. I've got to, a lot of times when you're out and about and you interact with a teacher, you might find something that's driving them crazy that you can get solved right like that. And if you can do that, man, that's a culture builder. But when you're sitting at your desk, your emails that you send are important sometimes, but what you do and how you act and where you are in your building probably hits home a lot more than an email you send to staff. You have to be consistent in what you say with your individual teachers and students, in meetings, in your messages to families and staff and kids, just so they're hearing the same thing. I have, my kids at home, because they're teenagers, sometimes they make fun of you, they give you a hard time. But I know I'm doing it right when I talk about time and place. That's one of my big phrases. I'll use it again in our next episode when we talk about dress code and what that looks like in a building. But I think if you talk about time and place, that to me is really one of the great setters of standards. And hey, listen, there are things that are appropriate to do when you're out hanging out with your buddies at the park playing basketball, the way you talk to each other, all those things compared to what we do here at school, or what you might do at church, or what you might do sitting at your grandma's dinner table. And so all of that spectrum of things and it's important for kids to understand that. Sometimes they're going to have a job and a career that they love, and you want them to understand time and place so that they can really thrive in that place. And so I use time and place all the time. I think that's really important. I talk to teachers and students and our administrative team about, hey, there are two types of people in this world. There are problem solvers and pot stirrers. We want to be problem solvers. And I think if you have those consistent phrases, people know that's what you're about, because that's what you're about. And I think that's important. That consistency, not only in your language, but in what your expectations, what your actions are, is another piece of this. You don't have to be, consistency doesn't mean rigidity, doesn't mean you're not going to change. It just means you're the same person, you have the same level of expectations, you're asking people to do the same things. And it's, when you think about culture, I think one thing I would want to emphasize to you is the culture you see in your building is not what you say. It's not any poster you put up on the walls. It's not any email you send to students and staff. Culture is about what you reinforce, what you lead everyone to know as the expectations in that building. What should you be doing after break? Kind of what are your practical things you should be doing? Think about your non-negotiables. What are the expectations that matter most to you? Plainfield High School, we're going to talk about time and place with our cell phones. Where, when can we use them? Where can we use them? That's important to me. Hats and hoods, we shouldn't be wearing those in the building. I don't think that's, and then language, how do we talk to one another, making sure that's appropriate when we talk about those things with students. Being a professional is another phrase that I use regularly. Be professional. We're professional learners. We want to act like professionals. And that's an important part of that. I often we say them all the time. We reinforce them with kids, but we also reinforce things with teachers, about how we're using instructional time, how we're, what are the professional expectations? What are we doing if we're taking a field trip? What are we doing when we have a sub? All of those things. How do we communicate with office staff when we have an issue? And just reaffirming the way we are professional with one another. Making sure that we're checking in with staff, making sure they understand when they have questions. And most important thing you can do with culture, a lot of this feels very negative, all the things you can't do, the things you shouldn't do. But I really feel like the best way is to show appreciation to staff, tell them thank you, tell them what they're doing well, what's going well, tell them, how proud you are of the work they're doing. I think that goes a really long way. We all want to be reaffirmed in the work that we're doing. I think that's really good. And I think it's also important that you listen. And when teachers tell you that something's a problem, try to address it. And you may not be able to fix every problem, but you need to listen and hear them and try to find a way to alleviate those. Making sure that everybody on your leadership team is doing that and not just you. That's part of being leading from the front is showing the way, but also reaffirming that your other leaders in your building are doing the same things. I think the other thing to remember is that we are all tired. We all are worn down in January. The weather's terrible. There's not a ray of sunshine. And, sometimes when people make mistakes, when things don't go well, reinforce. Tell them why, tell them what we need to be doing different. How do we fix it? And then before we start talking about consequences. And I think that's an important piece of this. Be clear. Don't beat around the bush. Being clear is being kind. And I've heard that, and I think that's really important. But making sure that everybody kind of understands the direction we're going as we build this culture together. I know sometimes it's easy to let something small go. But if you let small things go and you let them fester, you let them grow, man, they come back to bite you. So just making sure that, if it's something that you set as a clear expectation, that you make sure that students, your team, your staff, all those folks are working together on that. I think an important part of keeping people feeling good about the work you're doing is when you do have to talk to them about something, correcting them in a way that's empathetic and that kind of meets them where they are, and not coming down too hard, too fast, because I think that can really turn the tide against you for sure. You also aren't going to fix everything. If you walk in the halls of your building and you see 10 things that are wrong, pause, look at that list of the 10 things that are wrong, and what are the 1, 2, maybe 3, but really 1 or 2 things that you want to get fixed first? What is the first couple things that need to get better? Whether it's in your classrooms as you're doing observations, in the hallway as you're seeing your students, maybe your cafeteria, maybe the way kids are coming in your building or dismissing, see those things that need addressed and pick one thing to work on. And then when you get that one thing fixed, keep working on that, keep focused on that, but then work on the second thing. And I think that helps. This work that you're doing is incremental work. Rome wasn't built in a day. And in this case, culture isn't built in a day. It's built in a series of small gains, not only fixing behaviors and improving behaviors, but also just reinforcing and growing a culture of appreciation, of gratitude. I think those kind of things make people want to come to work. I think that's really important. I think as you get ready to start a new semester, you're in the middle of a beginning of a new semester, really set the tone for the whole spring. The spring for us at the high school level is a big testing time of year. We've got the SAT looming for us in March. We got AP testing. We have final exams and all those things that kind of come up in April and May. We're working on hiring. We've got graduation looming. We have kids trying to finish. So there's a lot of pressure building. And so if you can work at the beginning of the semester to really create some positive momentum, you can ride that into some more challenging times that are coming, some more high pressure things for students and staff, and just trying to do that. be intentional from the very beginning. We talked about that architect at the beginning of the episode. If you're doing that, if you're thinking about, being an architect for the culture of your building, what are you intentionally designing to do in January, right now, to try to improve your culture in your building? Are you sitting down and writing some thank you notes to some people who are really going above and beyond? Are you walking around in the morning and saying good morning, checking in on some teachers maybe are having a hard time, or maybe a teacher was out with a sick kid, checking in to make sure that everything's okay? I think all of those little things, those are all little things that, man, those add up, and that's intentional. You could be sitting in your office in the morning, try working your way through your to-do list. That doesn't help your culture of your building. That may make you feel better, but it doesn't help what's going on in the building. Building culture isn't a poster. Nike doesn't have a just do it poster that if you just hang it up in your hallway, it's going to improve all of your culture. It's not a big assembly. It's not some special speaker. Culture is about being intentional. It's about having a plan and then working that plan step by step, not trying to rush to the end, but work on those incremental gains throughout. That really matters. And this work matters. It's some of the most important work you do as a leader and then as you run a building. So I appreciate you tuning in. There's a lot of thoughts about culture. I think it's really important. I think it's a place that we can all spend more time to help our buildings grow, especially as we begin a new semester. So thanks for tuning in. We're going to dig a little bit more into some components of culture and just components of building a positive culture within your building. And we'll tackle some of those coming up in the future episodes. So thanks for tuning in, and always glad to have you here on Other Duties as Assigned. Thanks.